Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far our little storytelling family reaches. And please, if you enjoy heartfelt, real-life stories like this, go ahead and subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and keeps me sharing stories like this one. Alright, let's begin. It was one of those soft, golden evenings when the sun seems too lazy to set. I was driving home from a weekend gathering at my aunt's house, a noisy, laughter-filled day that left me with a warm exhaustion. My cousin's son, Ethan, had asked for a ride home. He was 21, tall, quiet, the kind of young man who always helped with dishes, but never said much beyond polite conversation. I didn't mind the company. Long drives can feel lonely, and I always liked the stillness that came from being around someone who didn't fill the air with small talk. The road stretched ahead, a ribbon of fading light winding through the countryside. The air smelled faintly of hay and cooling asphalt. My old SUV hummed along smoothly, the radio playing soft country tunes in the background. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window, his reflection flickering in the glass with every passing streetlight. We talked a little at first. About the gathering, about how Aunt Linda still made the world's best potato salad. He chuckled and agreed, but there was something about his tone, a hesitance, like words were sitting on the edge of his tongue, but refusing to jump. After a few miles of silence, he finally spoke. "Aunt Mary," he said quietly, "can I ask you something a little personal?" I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road but giving him a quick smile. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" He hesitated. I could almost hear the struggle inside him, the way his breath caught before the words found their way out. "Have you ever felt like you were pretending to be okay? Like everyone expects you to be one thing, but inside you're just tired of pretending?" The question landed heavier than I expected. I slowed the car a bit, glancing at him. His eyes were on his hands, fingers nervously twisting the hem of his jacket. There was something raw and real in his voice, something that pulled at me. I took a deep breath before answering. "Yes," I said. "I think everyone feels that way at some point, but some of us are better at hiding it than others." He nodded slowly, looking out the window again. "That's how I feel. Like I'm just playing a part I didn't choose." We drove on in silence for a while. The sky darkened into shades of lavender and navy. The headlights carved tunnels of light through the growing dusk. I could feel his unease filling the car, quiet but pressing. "You don't have to tell me what it's about," I said gently, "but if you need to talk, I'm here. No judgment." He gave a small, grateful smile, one that broke my heart a little. Then softly, almost to himself, he began to talk. He told me about feeling lost after college, about how the expectations of his parents and friends didn't match who he thought he was. About the pressure to be strong, successful, certain. About the nights when he stayed up, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone would understand him if he showed who he really was inside. There was no big drama in his words, just quiet honesty. But that made it hit even harder. As he spoke, I realized how much I'd overlooked him all these years, the quiet boy at family dinners, polite, smiling, always helping out. I had never thought to ask what was behind that calm face. Listening to him now, I felt both proud that he trusted me and deeply humbled that I hadn't noticed sooner. The road stretched on, and we passed through small towns lit with neon diner signs and flickering street lamps. I found myself remembering my own younger years, how I too had once driven through the same roads, wondering if I'd chosen the right life, the right path, the right version of myself. "Ethan," I said softly, "you don't have to have it all figured out yet. Nobody does, not really. Life doesn't come with a manual. It's okay to not know who you are for a while." He exhaled, almost like he'd been holding that breath for years. "It's just, everyone keeps telling me I should be grateful, that I've got everything. but sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life." His voice cracked a little on that last part. I reached over, resting my hand briefly on his shoulder, a simple gesture of comfort. "I know that feeling too well," I said quietly. "It's not weakness, Ethan. It's being human." He didn't say anything right away, but when he finally looked at me, there was something softer in his eyes, something like relief. The rest of the drive was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a peace in the silence now, the kind that comes when words have finally done their job. I could feel the night wrapping around us, calm and still, and I thought about how sometimes the most important conversations happen when you least expect them, on a quiet road between generations, when someone finally decides to be honest. When I dropped him off, he gave me a hug before getting out. It was a tight, grateful hug, the kind that said more than words could. "Thanks, Aunt Mary," he whispered, "for listening." I drove home alone after that, but something in me felt lighter. Maybe because I realized that even when you think your story is settled, life still has ways of surprising you, sometimes through the quiet honesty of someone who just needs to be heard. As I pulled into my driveway, the porch light glowing softly in the dark, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The world felt a little more connected, a little more forgiving. And I thought to myself, sometimes all it takes to change someone's life, or your own, is to listen with an open heart. That night, I went to bed with a strange sense of peace, not knowing that this conversation would be only the beginning of something much deeper to come. The night after I drove Ethan home, I couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in my mind, the way he said he felt like he was living someone else's life. I knew that feeling all too well. I had felt it years ago, after my divorce, when the silence of an empty house became both a comfort and a weight. There was something about Ethan's honesty that stirred up memories I thought I'd buried. A few days later, I called him just to check in. He answered quickly, sounding surprised but happy. "Hey, Aunt Mary," he said. "I was actually going to text you." We talked for a while, nothing too deep at first, just the usual chatter about how the week was going. But then he mentioned something about taking time off work, maybe traveling a bit, and that caught my attention. "Traveling where?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can just think." There was something brave about that, I thought. Most people spend their whole lives running from their thoughts, not toward them. "Well," I said with a smile, "if you ever need a place to think, you know my house has a porch that's good for that. I make a mean cup of coffee, too." He laughed softly. "I might just take you up on that." And he did. That Saturday, he showed up mid-morning, holding a small duffel bag and looking uncertain but hopeful. I could see the wariness in his eyes, but there was also a kind of quiet determination there. The air was cool, crisp with the first signs of autumn. I brewed us coffee and we sat on the porch, the wooden boards creaking under our feet, the old oak trees whispering above. For a while, we just watched the leaves tumble down. There was comfort in the silence. Eventually, he started talking again, this time about growing up, about how he always felt like he had to be the good one, the one who didn't cause trouble, who made everyone proud. "I don't even know what I like anymore," he admitted, staring at the steam rising from his cup. "Everything I've done has been because someone else said it was the right thing." I listened, nodding. "That's the tricky part about being a good person," I said. "People forget you need space to figure yourself out, too." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time, not just as his aunt, but as someone who might understand. "Did you ever feel that way?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Oh, more times than I can count. After your uncle and I split, I didn't know who I was without the title of wife. I'd built a whole life around taking care of others, and when that stopped, I realized I didn't know how to take care of myself." He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "So what did you do?" I learned to be alone without feeling lonely, I said. It took time. I started small, went for drives with no destination, read books that made me think, cooked meals just for myself. Eventually, I realized my life didn't end. It just changed shape. He smiled a little. That sounds nice. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. You don't have to be, I said gently. You just have to start noticing what makes you feel alive. For the rest of the afternoon, we talked about little things, music, movies, the things he missed from childhood. Every now and then, a breeze would carry the scent of pine and damp earth, and I'd think about how moments like this were the quiet heartbeats of life. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted everything gold, Ethan helped me bring in the porch cushions. He laughed when one nearly slipped from his hands, and for the first time that day, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to chase fireflies at family picnics. After dinner, he offered to help wash the dishes. Standing beside him in the soft kitchen light, I could sense that his mind was lighter somehow, like speaking his truth had made space for new air to move through him. When he left that night, he hugged me again, but this time it wasn't heavy with sadness. It felt like gratitude. Thanks for today, he said. I didn't realize how much I needed to talk. I smiled. Anytime, sweetheart. My door's always open. After he drove away, I sat back on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The night was quiet except for the crickets, and the stars felt closer than usual. I thought about how strange it is, the way people can drift in and out of our lives, and yet sometimes, in just one conversation, everything shifts. In Ethan, I saw a reflection of my younger self, the confusion, the longing for direction, the quiet strength underneath it all. And I realized something important. Maybe life's purpose isn't about having the answers, but about finding people you can be honest with while you search for them. That night, I said a quiet prayer for him, for clarity, for peace, and for courage to be himself. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of our talks. It felt more like the beginning of a path neither of us knew we needed to walk together. It had been about 2 weeks since that day on the porch when Ethan came by again. The trees were turning deeper shades of red and orange by then, and the air carried that familiar crispness of late fall. I had just come back from the grocery store when I saw his car parked by the curb. He was sitting on the hood, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, watching the leaves swirl down from the oak trees. "Hey, stranger," I called out as I stepped from my car. "You keeping watch over the neighborhood?" He smiled, that small, almost shy smile of his, just waiting for my favorite aunt. I laughed. Flattery will get you a hot meal, you know. Inside, I put on some tea and started chopping vegetables for soup. He offered to help, and before long, we were working side by side again, him peeling carrots, me stirring the pot. It felt natural, easy, like we'd been doing it for years. Once we sat down at the table, I noticed he seemed quieter than usual. His shoulders were tense, his eyes distant. I gave him a moment before asking, "Something on your mind?" He hesitated, tapping his spoon against the bowl. "Yeah, I told my parents I'm taking some time off from everything. From work, from all of it." I looked up, surprised but not shocked. "And how'd they take that?" "Not great," he admitted, letting out a short, nervous laugh. "Dad thinks I'm wasting time. Mom's worried I'm going through something I'll regret later." I could hear the frustration behind his words. "They love you, Ethan," I said softly. "They just don't understand that sometimes slowing down isn't the same as giving up." He nodded, staring into his soup. "I know, but it's hard to make them see that I'm not trying to run away. I'm trying to find something real." I leaned back, letting the warmth from my tea seep into my hands. "You're allowed to take that time. Sometimes people forget that searching is part of living. It doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're still growing." He looked up then, his expression softer. I wish they'd hear it like that." "Maybe they will someday," I said. "But even if they don't, what matters most is that you do." For a while, we just sat there, listening to the faint sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows. It was the kind of rain that makes everything smell fresh and alive again. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I lit a few candles, and we talked about small things, favorite memories, songs that remind us of childhood, the kind of silly family moments that still make us laugh. He told me about how he used to sneak cookies before dinner when he was little, and how I once caught him and pretended not to. We both laughed at that. The laughter faded into a comfortable silence, the kind that only happens between people who trust each other completely. I realized, sitting there with him, that something had changed, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet rhythm of how we listened and spoke. There was a tenderness to it, the kind that comes when you see someone's truth and hold it gently. At one point, he said, "You know, Aunt Mary, you're the first person I've really talked to like this." I smiled. "Then I'm honored. But you should know, it goes both ways. I don't talk like this much either. Not anymore." He looked at me curiously. "Why not?" I thought for a moment before answering. "I think I just got used to people not really wanting to hear the whole story. It's easier to keep things simple. I'm fine. Everything's okay." But those words don't mean much, do they? He shook his head slowly. "No, they really don't." The rain grew heavier outside, drumming softly against the roof. We sat quietly for a while, the glow from the candles flickering across the room. There was a calmness there, an understanding that didn't need many words. When he finally stood to leave, he lingered by the door. "I don't know what's next," he said, his voice steady but low. "But for the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe that's okay." I smiled, my heart warm. It is okay. Sometimes the best journeys start when you stop trying to plan every step. He nodded, then gave me that familiar hug, strong, real, and full of quiet gratitude. When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of his car fade into the distance. The rain slowed, and I went to the porch. The world smelled of wet earth and clean air, and I found myself thinking about how we never really stop learning from each other, no matter the age difference. Ethan had reminded me that it's never too late to rediscover yourself, and that being vulnerable isn't a weakness. It's a bridge. That night, as I got ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. There was something softer in my reflection, a quiet sense of peace, maybe even pride. Because in helping him open up, I had opened a door inside myself that I didn't know had been closed. And as I turned off the light, I couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter of our story wasn't quite finished yet. Something told me there was still more for both of us to learn from each other, something that would change the way we both saw our lives. It was almost Thanksgiving when I saw Ethan again. The air had turned sharp, the kind that makes your breath visible in the morning. I'd spent the day preparing for the holiday, making pies, setting out old family photos, the kind of quiet rituals that make a house feel like home. When he called that afternoon, his voice carried a steadiness I hadn't heard before. "Hey, Aunt Mary," he said. "Mind if I come by tonight? I've got something to tell you." "Of course," I said, though my heart gave a little twist. There was something about his tone that felt final, like a chapter about to close. When he arrived, he was bundled in a heavy coat, his hair a little longer, his expression calm. The moment he stepped inside, I could tell something in him had changed. He looked grounded, sure of himself in a quiet way. We sat at the kitchen table again, the same one where so many of our talks had unfolded. I poured him a cup of coffee, and we sat for a moment in comfortable silence. The ticking of the old clock on the wall filled the room. He smiled faintly. "You know," he said, "it feels strange being here. So much has happened in just a few months." I nodded. "You look different," I said. "Peaceful." I feel different, he replied, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He took a breath, steady and deliberate. I decided to move, just for a while. A friend of mine has a cabin out west, Colorado. I'm going to stay there for a few months. I need to see what life feels like when it's quiet. I need to find out what I want without all the noise. I felt a mix of pride and sadness wash over me. I knew this was the right thing for him, but letting go, even in the smallest way,